a galaxy far, far away, the Star Wars movies blew our freaking minds. The Star Wars movies were a really big event, and flash forward to 2017, and we are currently going through the biggest Star Wars renaissance of all time. Seems like every single year we're getting brand new movies, brand new comic books, loads of cool collectibles, and even the continuation of the much-loved series Star Wars Rebels. And that brings us to where we are now, where we pick up in the second half of Season 3. A season that is going to tie directly into the newest Star Wars movie, Star Wars Rogue One, which only premiered a short 3 weeks ago, but already we're starting to see its influence in the series right here. And honestly, I loved it. In fact, of the Season 3 episodes, even the ones that featured Darth Maul, this one was without a doubt my favorite, and it's really easy to see why, as this is the episode that formally introduces the character of Saw Gerrera, a character who originally appeared in Star Wars Clone Wars, but probably became more famous when he was played by Forrest Whitaker in the recently released Star Wars Rogue One. Mr. Whitaker returning to voice the character of Saw Gerrera adds a lot of credibility to this episode, as well as a lot of believability in Saw Gerrera. It's really great to finally spend some time with him, learn a little bit more of what he's about, and why the Rebel Alliance sees him as such an extremist. Really, the only things that are missing from this interpretation of Saw Gerrera are his robotic legs, his weird breathing problems, and of course, that goofy salt and peppered afro. And honestly, this makes a lot of sense. This episode probably takes place a full 2 years before the events of Rogue One, so clearly Saw Gerrera is going to go through some serious things, and we might even get to see him lose his leg in the series, as well as lose his faith in the rebellion, because that's one of the most important things about his character in Rogue One, is that he does form his very own rebel cell to go up against the Empire. However, his tactics are incredibly brutal, and the other rebels really just don't want anything to do with him by the time that Rogue One rolls around. However, he does have some crucial information as he knows about the Death Star, and we actually get to see the planting of the seeds for that in this episode, which I think is really awesome, and probably the best thing about it is that they actually tie it into the prequel movies, because as hardcore Star Wars fans will know, the Death Star itself was also sort of conceptualized by the Geonosian aliens in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That was actually where we got our very first glimpses of the Death Star as it was in its planning stages, as Poggle the Lesser, the leader of the Geonosians at the time, actually gave these Death Star plans to Darth Tyrannus, otherwise known as Count Christopher frickin' Lee Dooku. So the main story in this week's episode is that the Ghost Crew is going to the planet of Geonosis, where all of the Geonosians have essentially just been completely wiped out by the Empire. And supposedly they were building some sort of secret weapon there. Star Wars fans might know what that big frickin' thing is. And they're also trying to learn why all the Geonosians were completely wiped out. It also happens that Saw Gerrera, who is the leader of his very own rebel cell, happens to be on the planet at the time, so they're also going to reunite with him. However, when they arrive, everything is a creepy-ass ghost town, with all of Saw's crew getting completely killed off by unknown forces, when they're suddenly confronted by a group of battle droids. That is until Saw Gerrera comes in and saves the day, and he's reunited with the Ghost Crew, and this is where you immediately start to see a little bit of the clash between the two groups. They're basically like oil and water, with Saw Gerrera taking everything very seriously and very personal. Even if you never watched the Star Wars Clone Wars series, they fill you in on the events of his past, where his sister was actually killed by a group of separatists. So he's basically just trying to kill all of the Geonosians and basically get his very own personal revenge. And they end up finding this Geonosian alien who they end up naming Click-Clack because why the hell not? And throughout most of the episode, Saw Gerrera just wants to kill this guy. He just considers him this mindless bug, and he just wants to wipe out their race and get his final revenge against the separatists that killed his sister. Not only that, but he's also looking for a weapon that was being built on the planet of Geonosis, and there's a great scene where Click-Clack actually draws in the sand the view of the Death Star. He doesn't say it outright, nobody really knows what it is, but it's pretty clear that what he's actually trying to convey to them is, oh yeah, they're building a giant planet-destroying weapon here. Saw Gerrera wants all of the information that he can get from Click-Clack, and he's going to be willing to do a little bit of torture to make that happen, which of course doesn't sit well with the other members of the Ghost crew. But still, there is this other element of the episode which is actually pretty important to the future of the Geonosians. Click-Clack actually has this egg, which is supposedly going to hatch into a Geonosian queen, which could possibly revive their race. It's incredibly important to him, but Saw Gerrera sort of sees this as a bargaining chip and decides to take it from him. They get into this surprisingly tense confrontation where Saw Gerrera actually tries to kidnap Click-Clack and the egg so that they can escape, because he just wants all the information he can get, and if it means he's going to have to kill this Geonosian, really it's no problem for him. But right before they can get into this big battle, suddenly the Empire arrives, of course, to cause all sorts of trouble, and that's when they have to go into the deepest, darkest catacombs of Geonosis so that they can return Click-Clack to his former glory and find out where these secret weapons were being used by the Empire. And as they make their way down into this incredibly thrilling sequence while dodging all of these rocket troopers, they eventually discover these weapons, which are essentially these giant gas canisters. They think that this is actually the weapon that Click-Clack was drawing in the sand earlier, but no, I still think he's actually referring to the Death Star. That being said, it's a really thrilling sequence when they have to escape as they evade this massive Star Destroyer, which is coming up over the top as they arrive out of this massive canyon at the end. It's a really thrilling sequence that reminds me of some of the big action sequences from the films. So it pretty much ends with Saw Gerrera basically realizing that he did some shit that was kind of extreme, but he's really not all that sorry about it because eventually he leaves the rebellion, as we all know in Rogue One. So what's the rundown on this double episode 1 hour special of Star Wars Rebels? This one was freaking great. I absolutely loved it. I loved how they were able to connect the prequels, the new movies, brand new Rogue One stuff all together. Saw Gerrera returning is fantastic, and having him voiced by Forrest Whitaker was honestly one of the highlights of the episode. He hasn't developed that super over-the-top goofy accent that he actually uses in the movies, but it's still very much Forrest Whitaker. It still kind of looks like him, and he's wearing that weird sort of super bulky armor that he wears in the movie. But I can't wait to see if we're actually going to see him losing his leg or him actually having to get like that apparatus. I was almost expecting him to sort of do some name drops too, like maybe even mention Jyn Erso or something. I'm sure there's going to be some further connections to this as the series is going to go on, but we're just going to have to wait and see. And that's really the coolest thing about the next half of the season. We're going to be getting a lot of brand new stuff and some more tie-ins to Rogue One. In the preview that they released, there was a really great shot of Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was actually being escorted by some Dark Troopers, who are like the personal Stormtrooper guard of Director Krennic from Rogue One, and I just cannot wait to see what they're going to be about. I also love that shot where Grand Admiral Thrawn was actually training with those massive droids, showing that he can actually go hand-to-hand with people, which hopefully that leads to like a really big kick-ass action scene. I can't wait to see that. One of the biggest things from the trailer, though, is the reveal that Darth Maul and Obi-Wan are eventually going to have a confrontation. Darth Maul is going to make it to Tatooine. Old man Obi-Wan is there, the one that looks like Alec Guinness, and even the voice actor sort of like trying to mimic his voice a little bit. Basically, we're going to get the ultimate rematch between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I just think is great. Especially because it's the older version of Obi-Wan Kenobi, so like, just, it's really appealing to like my most hardcore nerdy fantasies of what they could do in an epic Star Wars battle. I'm just very much awaiting that one. There's also going to be some story elements which are going to go into Sabine and the fact that she has the Darksaber. They're going to go back to Mandalore. We're going to see her parents and everything. And again, that's really the genius of this episode for me, is how it felt so seamless, like a direct continuation of the things from the old movies and the new movies. And even some really not so subtle things, like some really great lines. There's this one scene where towards the end they're trying to escape from the Empire, and Sabine is in her ship and she's flying through this massive sandstorm, and she mentions she hates the sand because it gets everywhere, which is of course a reference to that incredibly shitty and cheesy line from Attack of the Clones from Anakin Skywalker. So overall, I really liked both of these episodes a lot. It was a great return to form and a great tie-in to Rogue One, and Saw Gerrera is a great character who already is going to become even more popular thanks to Rogue One and for finally reappearing here in Star Wars Rebels. I'm giving both of these episodes a 5 out of 5. Star Wars fans, definitely check these out. They will get you really excited. And if you loved the character of Saw Gerrera in the movie, this is your opportunity to finally learn a little bit more about his relationship with the Rebellion and how he influenced them, and to see where he's going leading up to Rogue One. So check it out. I love these episodes. If any of you guys did watch it, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. And make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you liked this review, please give it a like. I'd really appreciate it. And leave me a comment or two. I will see you guys next time. And as always, save the rebellion! Save the dream!